in policy and practice. I wanted to say first that this workshop is being recorded. And so, so Metley will start the recording. All right, we're good there. Of course, I want to thank Christopher Metley, Marla Buffong, and everyone at Fitchburg State University who invited us out to talk to you about this topic that's near and dear to our hearts. I'm Kendra Jason. I'll be the facilitator today. I own a company called Work for Change, LLC. I'm the founder, president, and CEO. My educational background is that I have a PhD in sociology from North Carolina State University. My areas of expertise are work and inequality, especially when it comes to race, class, and gender, social justice, and workplaces and organizations, which is why having this time to talk about Black women, influence in family and in work domains is particularly exciting for me. So this is an interactive workshop. We don't have any materials. We didn't have any materials to give you in advance, but we will hope that you have ready to type or you have some pen and paper or a journal so that you can take some notes as needed. Okay. So I am joined by my business partner, Chris Maycumber. Chris, you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris. It's really great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yes, and so Chris will help me with some of the more interactive features of our workshop today. Don't hesitate to ask questions along the way or have any points of clarification. But I'll just give you a quick overview of what we'll be talking about over the next hour. So, you know, why Black women? That's something we're going to jump right into and discuss. We're going to talk about Black women's work experiences in work and family as political forces and the influence of Black women, right? And then finally, we are going to discuss and think about how you individually can be a change agent of race and gender inequalities. Okay, just one quick, Metley, are you sure it's being recorded? Is it being recorded on your end?
Yes, ma'am, it's being recorded to the cloud.
I
Okay,
see
great.
it too. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great. I just can't see it. I just wanted to make sure you had record.
Yep.
All right. So like I said, we're going to think about or take some time to appreciate Black women in these different domains. And so the first question some people have is like, why center Black women, right? First of all, we know it's Black History Month. Everything is Black families, Black men, and Black women. But beyond Black History Month, which we appreciate, Black women should be valued and appreciated across the spectrum. And when we say we want to center Black women in this case, basically what that means is that we're just removing them from the margins. We're removing that lens of looking at everything through whiteness or using whiteness as a measurement for success or as a measurement for how things should be as the standard. And when you remove that, you allow for other people, in this case, Black women, to really shine, and you can value them at face value without that, that measurement against whiteness or white privilege or white supremacy, however you want to think about it. So centering Black women is purposeful. And again, I'm just really excited to share this topic with you, but really for us to really dig down and think about Black women and appreciate Black women in these. So the first thing that I would like for you to do is to take about a minute and just for yourself, answer this question. What can we learn from Black women? So just take about 60 seconds. I'm not going to time you necessarily, but just a moment of reflection. What do you feel we can learn from Black women? All right, take about, let's say 20 seconds to wrap up your ideas. All right, so remember, stick a little note or, a little bookmark where you are, because we're going to revisit this question a little bit later, okay? So the next exercise I would like you to do is to think about, or actually write, where do you see Black women working? So that, where do you see Black women in the workplace? Where do you see them working? So take a few seconds just to kind of think about that. What jobs are they doing? What roles? What positions do they have? Where do you see collections of Black women? Not just one here or there. And then once you've had a chance to think of that, now think on the other side. Where don't you see Black women? Where do you see mostly white spaces, or spaces that don't include Black women in particular? So look at it from both ends. Where do you see them and where do you not? All right, I'm going to pause for a moment here and offer some interaction. And so, where do you see Black women? What were some of the answers that you had? I see all of your names. Melly, did you want to say?
Sure. I put hair salons.
Uh-huh.
And then I put food services,
Mm-hmm.
but fast food, short order cook types of
Mm-hmm.
environments. So that's what I put.
Okay. Anybody else? Where do you see where are Black women visible in the spaces that you share? Demisty, I think you.
Well, here actually not many places. And I've asked that about Fitchburg, like where are other Black women? But in my past, like, medical field, nurses, nurses aides, food service, as Metley said, fast
Mhm.
food, and retail.
Okay. Okay. Now, what about on the opposite end? Where are they missing? Is it Kat? Kat, can you share where are Black women missing in your world?
I would say, I think mostly I feel like Black women are missing a lot in the medical field as well as the educational field. I know growing up, my school was pretty much diverse, but in like the teacher standpoint from it, there wasn't a lot of Black females
Mhm.
that were my teachers or my guidance counselors, as well as in the medical field as well. I haven't had really ever had like um, a, a Black female doctor or anything, and I feel like it's really important that we
Mhm.
do get more Black women in those roles, because in the education system, it does really make a difference. Also, especially for in the medical field, it makes a big difference as well.
Yes, Kat, you made some really good points. Before I talk about them, because I'll talk about them, let me see if anybody else wants to share. Where are Black women missing? Anyone else want to contribute? Thank you so much, Kat.
I can say
I think
something.
that was Zaria.
Oh, Zaria.
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering how you were like not moving your mouth. Thanks, Zaria. Go ahead, Marla.
So she kind of mentioned what I had. I had like the medical fields, like neurosurgeons, that type of stuff. I also had the STEM fields, so a lot of like engineers and stuff to do around STEM professions. And then I just added astronauts because I remember reading this article of like the first Black woman like going to space. I was like, well, it's really recent, so that's somewhere that we aren't really like.
Thank you. And then I see Rachel. Thank you. Rachel's using the chat. Anyone feel free to use the chat as well. Rachel added tech and computer programming. I'm assuming that's where you don't see Black women, like Marla was saying, right, Rachel?
Yes, right.
So Zara, I hope I'm pronouncing your, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but you make a really good point, especially in counterbalance to what Demisi added about. Both of you mentioned the medical field, but where are Black women in the medical field? You have a lot of Black women in these entry-level positions, CNAs, these frontline worker positions. And the thing about frontline workers is that they are the fastest growing occupation in the United States. But a part of that, not only is it female dominated, being 80% female, but it's also disproportionately represented by especially Black immigrant and other people of color. But on the other end, when it comes to higher level positions, like Kat mentioned, even at the university, you don't really see many Black women in executive positions. And so you have these pools or these reservoirs of Black women at these lower ranking, low wage, devalued jobs, and there's not much career opportunity to be in higher positions. Zara, did you want to say something, or is your mic just on? I don't want to miss anything. All right, so thank you.
No, it was just on, sorry. Yeah, okay, thank you.
I also wanted to just add banks and museums. Museums are important to me, and I have a friend who works with museums, and that's one of her complaints, that everyone is white. And she's a white woman too, but
yes,
how to get more people of color in the arts in general.
Yes, and I'm gonna stop talking because I would go on a whole. I'm like, stay focused. But yes, and the thing is, when you mention art, and especially the museum, one thing, this is not a part of what I have prepared, but what happens is what you miss is that perspective, right? You miss cultural confidence that comes with interpreting people's lives and understanding people's lives across a spectrum. And it's not to say that white people can't be historians and white people can't understand history and white people can't be great cultural critics. It is a great appreciation for diversity, and especially when white people can work with Black people and other people of color to interpret art, a beautiful thing can come out. So it's really, I'm glad you mentioned that as well. And so you all fell right into my trap of thinking about how these things are connected: racism, sexism, and the working Black woman. And to our point, or to your more so, you're going to see Black women in what we now clearly understand as essential work and low wage workers. And I'm gonna give you, this is not a, for the students that are here, this is not a sociology presentation. These are some quick facts. We're going to get to the action of this workshop, but it really goes back again to slavery and having enslaved labor. And so, and I'm really truncating this story. So, Black women basically went from enslaved labor into domestic work, inside of homes and domestic work. And then that domestic work more modernly translated into service work. And then service work, as you all mentioned, is entry-level, low wage, low status, devalued work. And so Black women are overrepresented in these minimum wage jobs, and actually 34% of the lowest earning quartile Black women comprise that. So another area is working caregivers. And I know all of you can probably think about this or relate to this. We're talking about daycare workers. We're talking about even in those medical jobs, as you were mentioning, that's paid caregiving, but there's also unpaid caregiving. And so 1/3 of the paid caregiving jobs, like we discussed with the healthcare work, is held by Black women. But in addition to Black women doing paid caregiving and Black women in general, Black women in general spend about 24 hours a week doing unpaid caregiving while they're working full time. So this is them taking care of their children, taking care of their adult parents, or any other caregiving role, children with disabilities, all of those things count. And with labor participation, 78% of Black women work, especially if they have children under the age of 6, and they're pretty much the highest of all women and ethnic groups that work at this rate. So not only are Black women earning the less, but they're still working more than other gendered groups. And then finally, what I want to add to this conversation is really think about that economic gap, that wage gap. This number fluctuates, but currently Black women earn about 64 cents to the dollar compared to white men. And what is really interesting about this statistic, a lot of people don't break this down. This is working the same job in the same occupation in the same job doing the same task. So it's not just the fact that Black women earn less than white men overall, it's Black women doing the same work that white men are doing are getting paid at this disproportionate rate, all right? And so all of these things compound when you have limited and low access to paid work and paid leave, and that goes way back up to that first bullet point about essential work and low wage workers not having access to healthcare and not having access to paid time off. So this is how race and sex or race and gender intersect, and we have these disparate outcomes for Black women in particular. All right, so I also want to talk about Black women in the household, okay? So one thing a lot of people don't know is that 80% of Black women are the breadwinners in their household. And even for those that are married, 50% of those who are married are the breadwinners in their household. And so again, not only do you have Black women earning less overall and working more overall, they're doing these and still having the primary role of bringing income into their household. All right, so childcare usually exceeds 20% of their earnings. Again, disproportionately having unpaid caregiving responsibilities, and then the lack of paid and family medical leave adds to stress, which adds to other health issues, okay? So again, just looking at the compounding effects, this is just the reality. And this is not to say, of course, that all Black women are in low wage jobs. That's not the picture that I'm painting here at all. But I do want to help you think about national trends and patterns and how Black women are disproportionate in the lower ends and in these lower range jobs. All right. And then you have COVID-19, right? And so what I want us to do now is do an exercise. It's going to be on Padlet here. So I'm going to throw this in the chat. Where's my chat? Oops, not stop share. Get that right back. Oh, here we go. Okay, so you can either use the QR code, you can click on that, that Padlet link that's in the chat. And the way Padlet works, if you're not familiar with Padlet, is I have a board set up here, and I've named some categories, which is a brainstorming board for you. And I just would like you to add your ideas for how you think or how you know COVID-19 may be influencing the situations that Black women have to navigate. And a lot of these ideas that you think about go beyond Black women, of course, but that's today's topic. So I already started. You can just hit the click, the little plus mark, and then I've added remote learning under COVID-19 and family. So we'll give you a couple minutes to add your ideas there. Just hit the plus sign and then write down any ideas that you have. They'll be anonymous. Yep. Yep. And the last box over here, if you have any other ideas that's not within work and family that you want to add, feel free to add those there. And then also, if there's a combination of something that you want to add, feel free to add that there. This is just brainstorming board to share our ideas. No free time or privacy. I think that's somebody who experienced that. All right, I'm gonna start sharing some of these answers. So media messages implying that higher health risks are somewhat the fault of Black people. Oh my goodness, yes. Health disparities, as we know, are structural in nature due to a lot of due to racism and other issues, but often the way is sensationalized is that it is the fault of the people who are victims of racism or sexism or patriarchy, the way things get framed. Overworked, still working, even though their personal health is at risk, doing a high-risk job, working longer hours or working less because your hours are cut, balancing home and family, less hours at work. Just the worrying about your health risks and family. And some people are healthy, but then they have family members who they don't want to expose to the virus, but they have to. It's really a really tough situation, all right? And no free time or privacy. And so that's again, a whole conversation to be had in itself, okay? I really thank you for your participation in this, this brainstorming board here. All right. So what I would like to do now is to shift a bit, right? One thing when I do my research and on Black women myself, and we do have to tell the story about how Black people have to navigate structural racism, and that we have trauma and we have stress and we have, we deal with disparities. But what we don't want to lose joy and resilience that also encompasses the Black experience, right? We don't want to focus on Black people being victims of their situation and think about how they actually navigate successfully and become change agents within the situations that they're in. And so I want us to think about women, Black women as leaders, right? So I've just noted 3 here, really picked 3 out of the sky because there are so many that are worth honorable mention. Thinking about Black women, again, not so much thinking about how oppression has constrained and constricted, what they're able to do, but women who force existing political leaders to pay attention to their needs. And so, of course, I have Sojourner Truth, who's so famous for the Ain't I a Woman speech, where she really pushed people to think of her as a woman, even though she was Black. I'm also a woman as well. Dorothy Height may not be as known to everyone, but Dorothy Height is definitely a civil rights and women's rights activist. She passed away recently. Again, just one of many I could have chose. And I also wanted to bring to your attention a contemporary activist, Stacey Abrams, of course, who did some phenomenal things down in Georgia when it came to the last, actually the most recent election. And so these are just 3 examples of women across history and time who are relatable in this story. So what I'm going to do here to help you think about this is show a short video. It's only 3 minutes about Black women and political change. And I will tell you, there is a thought exercise after this. So if anything sticks out to you, if any quote was made or anything that was said or shown to you that really resonates with you, just kind of jot it down so that you can be prepared for the exercise that comes next. Okay, let me make sure I am sharing my sound. Chris, you'll give me a thumbs up if you can hear this.
Black women have always been at the forefront
Yes,
of
ma'am.
saving democracy and transforming it. If people haven't gotten that by now, I don't know where you've been or what cave you've been living in.
Because Black women have always led when it comes to cutting edge, doing something different, being authentic, really setting the path. Black women have done that.
Black women are leading in their families, their communities, in their homes, in their neighborhoods. The level of volunteerism, the level of entrepreneurship is so high in the Black community.
The reason that Black women participate at this level is because it impacts us. We need to be able to support our families, we want to be able to support ourselves, and we want to live in communities that do have access to the American dream that everybody talks so fondly about.
There have been times when Black women's voices are really heard and respected within the broader progressive movement, but there's so much work to do to make sure that not just Black women, but everyday people get a chance to sort of influence policy, get a chance to talk about their vision for what they want their lives to be.
Are the people who Black women voted into office, are they showing their gratitude by pushing the policies and legislation that is going to help rather than harm Black women? And from the last time I checked, no.
An agenda that reflected the priorities of Black women would look like a bold, multiracial, populist agenda. It would talk about universal health care, about ending mass incarceration, universal child care and paid family leave, the right to collectively bargain on the job, and addressing environmental injustice, about winning debt-free college and eliminating existing student debt.
There's something inherently heart-centered and people-centered in the way that we build coalition with one another, and we approach this work, I think, with more of a community perspective.
You can't really talk about issues that affect people of color if you don't have people of color leading it or being at the forefront or including them at the table.
You can't support Black women's leadership and try to defang it, de-radicalize it, sort of sanitize it. You can't support Black women's leadership and try to sort of make it very individualistic. It has to be holistic and sort of community-oriented.
There has been no movement in the United States that has been successful without the active participation of Black women. So we could keep saying identity politics are splitting us, but I think what we're actually seeing is that when we pay attention to the unique experiences of Black women, for example, that it motivates and activates us to be even more amazing politically and electorally than we already are.
We'll all be like #winning, right, if we follow and support Black women.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
I saw it. I was like,
Just getting ready to do the motion. Yeah.
to take a moment and write your reaction to the video. Any reactions that you had, you can expand any thoughts or anything that you jotted down or made a mental note on, and then take a step further and answer the question, what can you learn from Black women? So how can you expand upon the answer that you had in the opening segment of this workshop, just from what you've learned over the minutes? I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Now, if you would, can you throw a couple of your ideas into the chat just so we can sort of in community see what your ideas are as far as what do you feel like we can learn from Black women? You can pull in a bullet point, you can put it as a full sentence. It doesn't have to be a paragraph or anything. Yes.
I love that medley. That's great.
Right. One thing, Kat, that's a really good point. One thing that one point that was made is that when Black women engage in political action, and I'll talk about this more actually on the next slide, when Black women engage in political action, even though the ideas are set for the betterment, for the betterment and empowerment of the Black community, of their children, of their spouses, of their grandmothers and such, everyone benefits from it because it's a holistic approach to health, to education, to politics, to medicine, whatever the case is, okay? Yes, Black women are not angry, not pushy, not loud, but powerful. And a lot of times, you know, Black women are expressive, you know, Black women are loud and flavorful and, you know, all of the zesty, whatever words you want to use. And because, again, and this is where that white lens of standardization come in, because if we interpret Black women using a white lens, using a culture, it's like a cultural misstep, because you will misinterpret that as being loud and pushy, but really it's a different cultural element, it's a different approach. All right, we have some really good answers. Strength, how to persevere in spite of obstacles, systemic racism and sexism, powerful. How to lead not only in their but beyond their families. All right, go Stacey. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your ideas there. So here it's just really kind of reiterating what I just said. One interesting fact about Black women when it comes to policy, this is shorthand, but basically what it's saying is that Black women are similar to non-Black women, so women and women, when it comes to pro-women issues, right? And Black women are similar to Black men when it comes to minority targeted issues, okay? But they are unlike other women and unlike other Black people or other Black men particularly, on what they think should be prioritized, okay? So I gave 4 basic tenets here: education, healthcare, economic development, and employment. And you can just see these are some of the initiatives that Black women prioritize as far as when it comes to policy and moving policy forward. So I'll just give you just a few seconds to read over that. And you can see a bit how it may separate them from other women, and it may separate them from Black men in some sense. Not to say that it can't overlap, but this is what they prioritize. All right. So now I would like us to think about the Black women in your life, okay? So this is a writing exercise for you. The first thing I want you to do is to think about who are some Black women in your life and name them, okay? Maybe you know their first and last name, maybe you just know first name, right? But name who they are. See if you can come up with 5. Shoot for 3 if you can't come up with 5. But you know, if it's only 1, then that's fine. But just give them a name, okay? So after you name them, think about how they push policy or practice forward. Now, I want to be careful with this question because I don't want you to think that the person that you has to be a politician or the person that you name has to be an executive, right? The person you name could be your mother, or it could be, you know, a coworker that you have. What is it that they do that inspires you? It has to be some type of positive motion forward. They do that inspires you. And I want you next to their name to acknowledge their work. And then after you've done that, think about how have they influenced you directly, okay? So I'll give you a few minutes to jot down some ideas, name these women, acknowledge their work, and amplify their value to you, okay? I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Take about 30 more seconds to finish up your ideas. I know I didn't give you enough time. Take about 30 seconds to finish up your ideas, and then Chris is going to lead us in an exercise.
You are going to use what you are writing down, so make sure you have some content prepared for the next little segment. Okay. All right. So we are going to move along to our next little segment here. We're going to do breakout rooms. And let me advance this here. Kendra, I can't advance the slides. It's not letting me. Oh, there we go. All right. So what we want to do now is take that list that you have, and we want to create space. There's something really powerful about simply dialoguing like we're doing here and creating space. We want you to talk to each other in breakout rooms. And if you haven't done a breakout room before, you just have to sit back. We're going to put you into a room so you can talk to each other. We'll probably do breakout rooms with about 3 people per room. And we want you to talk about one of the women on your list. And we really want you to spend a few minutes. We're going to give you about 6 minutes total. So taking turns saying, who did you write about? Pick one person and just dialogue about why you think this woman should be appreciated, should be honored, should be celebrated, and to just hold space for that and just have conversations. So I'll stop talking, put you into breakout rooms, and give you about 6 minutes to do that. And we are not going to then come back and debrief. The conversation will only exist in your little breakout rooms, okay? So don't feel like you then have to have something to talk about after. The point of this is to create this space for you to talk to each other about the women on your lists, okay? All right, so we've got 3 breakout rooms. We're putting, yeah, there we go. Okay. All right, have a good conversation. We'll see you in a few minutes. There we go. Something happened to the formatting when I advanced the slide. Did it just go off presentation?
You didn't advance it. I advanced it. You couldn't advance it because you weren't sharing your screen.
Okay.
So if you saw anything with formatting, it was just on your computer. It was fine for everyone.
Oh, okay, because it's not as big now. It's like, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, I got it. So that's right. So one person has to advance the slides. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm the one who's sharing the screen. So
Right.
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
We are really sticking to our time sheet here.
That's good. I'm gonna go on mute. That way the recording's not picking up all my shuffling.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna do the 1 minute, because if I do it now, it'll give them 1 more minute to wrap up. It's not much time, but it should be enough to float some
Yeah,
good
they should
things.
get they should have a countdown in their rooms. You do a broadcast message? Is that what-
Oh, I thought, I just was looking at my phone, timing it. I didn't set up a time. Oh, I didn't know. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it says the breakout room is going to close in 46 seconds.
Yeah.
So they'll
Well,
be
I just,
returning now.
yeah. Well, when you hit close, it'll give 1 minute left. So I figured I'd 5.5 minutes. I timed it in my head.
Did we hit our return button too soon? I think that was my fault.
No, it's
you're
fine.
You're good. We just were like, if you're wrapping up and you wanted to come back, that's great. If they need more time, that's fine too. Whatever folks want to do. It looks like, yeah, that's good. Be just in
We'll be
time.
back in 12 seconds.
Yes. Countdown. I do like Zoom for that. Yeah. Make sure everyone's back before we get going here.
Must be good conversations when they stay in there to the last minute.
That is good. It's a good sign. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Kendra was just saying it's a good sign when people are still talking when we close out rooms. So I know that wasn't a very large amount of time to have conversation, but hopefully it was enough to be able to talk about the women on your list, and maybe you had some shared names, maybe not. And, you know, really what we want to do also is talk about how Black women have historically done so much work in terms of pushing social justice forward, as Kendra highlighted and as that video showed. In almost every progressive movement, in every movement in our country that brought about social change, that brought about major sweeping policy change, Black women have been at the forefront. Because we live in a society that is white supremacist and male dominated, Black women don't get credit for that. And they've often been there building alliances across social justice movements and really prioritizing women and racial minorities in a society that has been dominated by white men for a long time. And part of what we're trying to do is show how when Black women are organizing, because we tend to look through the white lens, we see it as like a special interest or things that are only helping the Black community. And part of what we wanted to do was to kind of magnify and amplify Black women's contributions and say, these are fighting for human rights, for social change, for healthcare, for transforming the criminal justice system, for improving access to good, healthy foods, for improving educational outcomes. These are issues that we all benefit from. So what we wanted to ask you is, what are some things that you can and will do for them, particularly for the white folks here tonight? What are some things that you can do to support Black women? We're seeing, although whites have always been allies to civil rights activism and to Black rights and Black activism, what we're seeing is a historically significant moment where we're seeing an increasing number of white allies who are aligning themselves with the Black Lives Matter movement. So what are some things you can do in addition to aligning yourself with movements? Not everybody wants to go out in the streets and protest in that way. There are many things you can do to help support Black women. For example, you can interrupt inequality. What does that look like? Well, it can look like acknowledging that power and privilege exist, naming it. It is tempting to say things like, I don't see race, or I live in a post-race society and I don't see color, I just see people, right? While a lot of whites might feel good doing that, what that does is it really just negates the fact that we do live in a society where race does matter. We have a society that is stratified by race, and we have, dozens of outcomes of race-based inequality. So acknowledging that we live in a society where systemic racism still matters and that whites benefit from doing nothing else other than being white in that kind of society. So acknowledging power and privilege is powerful. Also supporting those who express injustice. So aligning yourselves with, and this can be on campus, this can be off campus. Oftentimes I think of college campuses as really holding potential for some really radical change. And by radical, I just mean getting at the root of the problem, right? Having dialogue about issues that you might not have space to talk about when you're off campus. And also part of supporting Black women is taking small risks. It doesn't need to be some major act, right? It can be something really small, like interrupting racist language, like holding somebody accountable for something they say, right? We're really big advocates about language matters because language reflects power. The words we use and the words we don't use reflects systems of power. Another way you can interrupt inequality is to be accountable yourself. So silence is the voice of complicity, right? Kendra jumped in, not laughing at racist and sexist jokes, right? Not letting it go. That's not just symbolically powerful, but it interrupts language, and language is what creates meaning. So those are really important things that we can all do. You may be familiar with the term like ally, being either an aspiring white ally or a white ally. There's a new term that has emerged from Bettina Love, who says that's not enough anymore. We've got to be co-conspirators. And what's distinct about being a co-conspirator is that you're willing to put yourself at risk. It's more directly and personally impactful. An ally is almost passive. You can be like, I support that. Where an ally is someone who supports, might read, might like something and show up, and maybe can be appreciative. A co-conspirator takes it to that next level and is willing to personally take on risk and willing to lose something, right? Offering up privilege. Mm-hmm. If you say something at work, if you confront your boss who is saying something, that's a risk, right? On behalf of your Black coworkers, right? So you have to be willing to be a co-conspirator in that fight. And also what that means is not shrinking to scrutiny and critique. A lot of times with ally activism, people say, well, I didn't mean to do that, or that's not what I meant. It can get really defensive. And part of being a co-conspirator and helping interrupt inequality as a white person is being willing to take feedback and not get defensive. So that's also a part of holding yourself accountable. So if a Black person in your life holds you accountable, calls you out, or as we say now, calls you in, right? That to be willing and being receptive to that feedback, because we all make mistakes. We all have blind spots, right? Lastly, creating space, which is partly what we wanted to do tonight, having space. I know students can often feel like it's so hard to find a space on campus where they can talk about these issues and feel validated and supported, right? So there's power in naming and creating space. Center the experiences of Black women, right? And support them. And part of that is being quiet and just listening and not having to be quick to jump in. So much a part of white culture is feeling like uncomfortable with discomfort, right? And being uncomfortable and having to feel like you have an answer for everything right away. It's okay to offer up space, be quiet, and listen, and not feel like you have to go into action mode, right? And part of it also is centering the needs of Black women, not your own needs, right? And not the sort of me questions. Lastly, demonstrate solidarity in public spaces. There's a lot of power in being visible, right? And showing up and being visible, and not for the Instagram photo, right? Not to make some sort of social media post, but visibility in terms of aligning yourselves with Black women, which includes advocating for them, not just publicly, right, where people will see you, but also in those private spaces, whether it's in a classroom, in a dorm room, in your office, in your family life. So being an advocate both publicly and privately.
And I just want to jump in really quickly here, Chris, and say, when it's saying demonstrate your solidarity in public places, that also includes, and this, allyship is really big. Let's just say you're in a meeting, and someone comes, let's say as a Black woman, and I've had an interaction in the meeting, or somebody said something that was racially inappropriate, even if I didn't address it. Someone would come up to me after the meeting, a white person, and say, I really didn't like it when, or, I really agreed with you when you said after the meeting, but not situationally where they advocated for a Black person, a woman, or, you know, whoever the other is in that situation. They do it in these little private spaces where, again, that's not being a co-conspirator, that is being an ally. I got your back as long as no one sees that I have your back, right? And that's another example of a difference between the ally and co-conspirator.
That is such a great example of the difference, right? Thanks, Kendra, for that.
You're welcome. So I think this is our last written exercise. So we would like you to write out this sentence to fill in the blank. So now that I have learned more about the challenges that Black women face at work and home, I will try to, wherever you are, blank, to combat the negative effects of racism and sexism they experience. So I would like you to write out the full sentence and fill in the blank for what you will do, or what you will at least try to do to combat these negative effects. And it is so fine if you steal one of our answers from the previous slide.
We did work hard on those.
Or you can come up with something totally new. And the thing about this writing prompt is that everyone has a role and a responsibility towards the alleviation that Black women, experience when it comes to racism, sexism, classism, patriarchy. Today's conversation is about Black women. As you know, we could have another conversation about Native American men, about heterosexual men, about
You froze up a little, Kendra. Yeah, she always says when she freezes, she sees everyone else freeze. So she thinks we're all frozen right now. I think so. Maybe she sees it that way. Usually it'll come back.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I was like, she'll come back. There she
Thank
is.
you. What's funny about that is when, number one, it always happens when I'm saying something really good.
You always say something good.
At least when I think I'm saying something really good.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. When it happens, I don't freeze, everyone else freezes, and then it's an exchange. But I was just saying that with this prompt, it is everyone's responsibility, or everybody has a role in alleviating the challenges that people who have been moved from the margin, or not centered. You can be a change agent. You are. It's not you can be. You are a change agent because you already have the potential. You already have the know-how, and now you have the tools and the language to begin to do this work in a way that can be really effective and meaningful. Again, small risk. We're not asking anybody to protest. We're not asking anybody to give up their job. We're not asking anybody to fight anybody, but very small things that you can do in your everyday experience, okay? So let me let's just throw some ideas in the chat. So can you throw anybody who wants to share their fill in the blank, can you just put your fill in the blank in the chat? And while you do that, I'll tell you, for me, when I was in undergrad, that was the first time that I had really been presented with the idea that I can be a change agent when it comes to disrupting racism, sexism, any of the isms that we want to eliminate. And mine was not laughing at racist and sexist jokes. That was a huge deal for me. Like, I was like, no way, comedy is comedy. I had that mentality. But then when I realized the power in disrupting that power dynamic where someone of privilege is making fun of or marginalizing or humiliating someone. I learned that that was not going to happen on my watch anymore. Okay. All right. So thank you for sharing. Call out injustices as I witness them. All right. Step in. That can be small or that can be really huge, just depending on the situation. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to share? It's fine if you do or do not. All right, awesome. So I just want to, a couple things to wrap up here. Just wanted to lay out some really clear policies and practices that, we can promote to support Black women and their families, create safe spaces. Thank you so much for saying that. So my internet must have been slow because I have answers coming in now. Bring Black women to the table. Yes, communicate what I know to believe. Yes, one of the main things when it comes to combating or disrupting this inequality is what we said before. When someone says that they have been treated unfairly, if they face an injustice, if they've been victimized, try this first. Believe them. Instead of questioning them, having them retell you the story so you can see if you can figure out if that's what really happened or if you would interpret it a different way. Try the strategy to believe them first and then take action on that. And that is a great move of empowerment that you can do. Thank you, Metley, for adding that. All right, so we can elect more Black women to political offices. This would, as Chris mentioned earlier, help with education, health, incarceration, mass incarceration, voter suppression. We can promote health access, insurance coverage, and paid leave. This will give care support when it comes to children, caring for those with disability and older adults, which is huge during COVID-19, of course. And then paying a living wage and creating flexible work arrangement. And all of these things, especially the last one, will really help with the economic security that Black families face. Now, again, of course, these are universal answers, right? But the thing is that Black families disproportionately have negative impacts or negative consequences or outcome things, all right? But another thing to think about is started right away. I just wanted to show a short clip. So Chris and I, we run a podcast. It's called Jobs and Work. It's a Jobs and Work podcast. We post every Friday. And we talked just a little bit about this topic earlier this month. And so I just wanted to share this really short clip with you before we open up Q&A. Workplaces are thinking about recovery is that the decisions that they make today are going to have very long-term impact for all of their workers. And so the fact that people have been displaced to the home, and this is not the situation where, you're a company that, your employees and your markets are working better because you have people working remotely. These are people who need to be in a workplace and who depend on income from having hours at their workplace, not at home. It's going to have some long economical and career development effects for them. And so just thinking about gender patterns and not leading with the mindset that, I should really bring a man back first because he's a breadwinner or because he's a leader in his home. Women have those same responsibilities. So I'm not saying for you to pick a man over a woman or a woman over a man, but I'm saying just be conscious of your gender bias when you're making those types of decisions. And then also be mindful of the different life circumstances that your male, female, non-binary people may have at work, especially when it comes to childcare responsibilities. And so you're going to have almost by default more women doing childcare work while they're working their full-time jobs or while they're working for you. And so, not to say men don't do that as well, but women are disproportionately doing it. So when it comes to sanctions, promotions, flexibility, and any of those things that will either reward or sanction people based on their productivity and their presence at work, just again, keep in mind that women are disproportionately doing this childcare work. Men are doing it as well, but that needs to be considered as you're making these decisions, these executive level decisions about how to manage and treat your workers moving forward. So the prompt to that was Chris had asked me and managers and workers better, especially, well, women in the workforce, but especially the whole conversation is about women in the workforce in the context of COVID, but especially Black women as well. And so if you watch this on YouTube, actually, Chris, can you throw our YouTube link in there? If you watch this on YouTube, you can have it closed caption, and our segments are only about 20 minutes long. So so there's some nice bite-sized pieces of information, okay? So now we're at 7 o'clock, but we are available for any questions or feedback or anything that you wanted to talk about more that we're here to talk anything out or answer any questions.
Can you offer some language, like say if we're at a meeting and someone, you know, universities have these hierarchies, and sometimes they're ancient hierarchies where people have tenure and or they don't, you know, they have job security or they don't, or they feel like they don't have job security, even if they do. So if you are in a situation where you see something happen or you hear someone say something unsavory, can you offer language that can point that out without, how do I say this, without making it seem, to make it nicely, say it nicely to people so they won't be offended or feel like they're made to look stupid? Or...
Yeah, you bring up a really common dynamic, and one of the big parts of your dynamics that you introduced was that there are power differentials in these meetings, especially when it comes to those who are lecturers versus those who are tenure track, and then you have those who are tenure track versus those who are tenured, and then where do you fit in that ranking order and how that matters. And so, you know, I'm really conscious of, you know, the power dynamics, especially that those who have less power play. And so what I would suggest, and Chris, I would like, after I answer this too, one thing that I'm dealing with a lot now as we're talking about anti-racist sentiments and statements in the colleges at you know, across the universities, is to talk to whoever your chair or your leadership is. And sometimes it comes from the chair, I get it. It comes from that particular person, but finding someone who's in a leadership role and saying, maybe after the meeting, when this happened, you know, this is what I recognize as happening, this, you know, so whatever pattern that you recognize, you may not say it right there in the meeting, just depending on your positionality. Just depending on your positionality, because I'm really, really aware of how that works. But this is where allies really come in as well, because in that relationship, the person who has the least amount of power hopefully has an ally in the room. And that's where we are asking for allies and co-conspirators to step up on the behalf of that person who has the less power and who is in a situation where, you know, their job could be at stake, their reputation could be at stake, their future opportunities could be at stake.
And this is why leadership is so important, having a leader that, and I think trust, like if you don't trust the space you're in, you don't trust disclosing or holding someone accountable, distrust will fracture good intentions. It will just fracture that. And one of the things that I've done lately that I've been hearing, and, you know, for the white people here can probably, you know, if I had a dollar for every time some other white person said to me how impressed they were with a Black colleague and how articulate they were, or this like surprise, this element of surprise about how impressive their resume is. And I said, well, of course it's impressive because they're a PhD applying for the job, or of course it's impressive because they're like our top candidate. But one of the things, like Kendra is saying, sometimes you don't feel trust, like you can't say things like that if there's a power imbalance, if you're afraid of repercussions, retribution is real. One of the things I do is ask a question.
Mhm.
Oh, that's interesting that you feel that way. I've heard other people feel that way. Can you tell me more about that?
Mhm.
And get them to kind of unpack it so they actually have to say it rather than you having to sometimes say it. You can say, that's interesting, or I'm not sure what you mean. Can you say more about that? Like when someone says like she's articulate or he's articulate, I'll be like, what do you mean by that? Or you seem surprised. Why are you, how come? So sometimes I just pose a question, which puts it back on them.
Mhm.
And then you don't have to make some sort of declaration about it. But it is, and there's a whole skill set involved in those moments.
Mhm.
How do you say it and when do you say it and who's going to have your back, which is why co-conspirators, like Kendra said, is critical. And it's beyond time for, white faculty and staff to step up and take those risks. Absolutely. Medley,
I love that.
Yeah, Kendra.
I was just saying, I know I keep talking about the jokes, but that's the same strategy that someone told me about, like another way that, when someone makes a racist joke or a joke that's unsavory, you can say, I don't see where that's funny. How is that funny? And when you put it on them to explain, to unpack why this joke is funny, really you're making it their responsibility to say, well, how, I am being racist or sexist or whatever the case is. And, it just puts them in a position. So I really appreciate Chris's suggestion of sort of throwing it back in a question as a way to sort of destabilize what they were, the power of what they were, the intention behind what they were doing. Bentley, did you have a question?
I did. I do. I wanted just to speak to the whole thing about, when people make comments where I really do think they mean them as compliments, but a lot of times they're minimizing. Who you are as a professional, as a person of color who has made it to this position and so forth. A lot of times those compliments, they come off as minimizing and everything because I start to question what were your expectations of me originally. And everything. And it's quite challenging about how you're going to process that out with a white peer, white colleague, because you don't want it to come off in the wrong way in regards to what you're feeling. But there's a strong emotion there because I immediately go, well, what were your initial expectations of me / my work and what I was going to bring to the table?
So
right.
I have two quick thoughts. I told a colleague today, I said a department meeting is like the worst passive aggressive relationship you'll ever be in. It would be a terrible relationship because everybody's so passive aggressive.
Totally.
Yeah, I forgot. Laughing at my own self, I forgot the second part. What else were you saying?
There were just two things that has emerged for me during this training. A, is not necessarily I am looking at who's here. I am looking at the number of people that are here. And I have been processing if this training was about Black men, or I'm thinking about the Black Lives, Blue Lives program that we had and so forth, and the number of people that were there versus, that are here and everything. And it just started, I'm just jumping from one emotion and one thought to another, to another, to another. Immediately, I just Googled up, the Say Her Name movement. I was like, okay, how did that emerge? And I think that is definitely about Black women and police brutality. Why that?
Right.
Kimberly Crenshaw,
Yeah, and so it's just like all these things keep popping up for me and the emotions attached to them because I am going, why are the numbers the way they are for this program? And if it was slightly changed, would the numbers be different? And and I do think they would be different.
Hey,
And
Natalie,
so then
welcome to my
that
world.
goes,
Mr. Bellinger is like, yep, I know. It is. The devaluation. I mean, and, you know, or if it was about like, you know, Black college athletes in a role that people want to see, you know, or, you know, that, and you're on a predominantly white campus, right? So you're gonna have students who feel like it's not their issue, who feel like they can disconnect and opt out. We have to make it harder to opt out. And,
So
and that's hard to do. That's hard to do.
It also goes back to one of the questions that we presented in the workshop. Where do you see Black women at work? And if you see Black women, or only can conceptualize Black women in low-ranking, low-status positions, and the ones that you know that are in executive high-level positions are the exception. The idea could be, well, what can I learn from Black women? You know, what have they done? Because I don't see the evidence of what they've done. I don't see the evidence of how they can be significant. And so when you bring presentations or workshops like this to the table, it is really a matter of education. And what Chris and our approach is not just education, because we didn't want it to be like a class, but really to sit back and appreciate, to have time. That's why we had that breakout room, like just talk about them. Just give them some time and some space, give them some mental space that you may not have given them before. And we're hoping, of course, that carries over. But I mean, you're right, Metley. Like when it's about Black women, the numbers dwindle, right? Because Black women have been purposely made invisible. And so when you give them a platform, people aren't expecting to see anything.
And we don't necessarily have to do it now, but if possible, before we close out, there was a slide that I wasn't able to completely process, and this could even be a side conversation, but it was the one that discussed about Black women and women, and then Black women, and then other minorities, and there was like the 4 blocks and so forth. I wasn't able to completely process. Is that, if you're able just to give us a little bit more there about how do we process this visual?
So basically hold on, let me make you smaller so I can see it. So basically under these, you know, political people, women, you know, fight for pro-women type of initiatives, such as like paid time off, and give me some more, Chris. What are some more women's rights issues?
Like reproductive justice, or access to healthcare, education outcomes. Yeah.
Right. So good. Education, right? Education outcomes. We want the best education for our children, right? We want the best education through charter schools. We want the best education through choice. We want the best education for after school programs. Those are universal. But when it comes to Black women, for example, we're saying school to prison pipeline, please. Can we talk about how, you know, Black boys and girls are being disciplined in school, right? So it's not about necessarily, you know, charter schools and you know, the things that are generic after school programs, you know, the availability of certain people having scholarships versus others. It's more about cultural competence. Can I trust that when I give you my Black son for 8 hours a day, that you will understand his needs and not misinterpret them as disciplinary actions, for example? And so economic development, right? So again, more general issues for, let's say, Black men, for example, where Black men will be different from Black women. Black men may talk about entrepreneurship. What programs are there out there for Black men or Black families who want to be entrepreneurs, right? Black women are like housing security, right? Because Black women face some of the most housing insecurity across the nation, right? So it's not that they don't believe or promote entrepreneurship when it comes to economic development, but their concerns are at a different level. And so they say, you know, we need community-based economic development, which a lot lot of initiatives from sometimes Black men and sometimes mostly white women, for example, are more individualistic in nature. Can I get a grant? Can I get, some type of programming, for my education? But it's not community-based in nature in the way that Black women may promote a community-based approach. That makes sense.
If I could just add one too, as well, with the, when we think about criminal justice reform and mass incarceration, I just talked to my students today about the fact that women's incarceration since the 1980s has increased 600%. And has disproportionately impacted Black and brown women, the large majority of which are survivors of sexual violence. So we're also studying what we're calling the sexual abuse to prison pipeline, particularly for Black and brown women and girls. So that's like one more issue that would sort of look at the intersection between, socioeconomic status, race, gender. So that's like how we would look at policy through the lens of Black and brown women.
For my Fitchburg State colleagues, I think this is very interesting when we talk about our university strategic plan around educational justice being a student-ready campus, and just how our students may be processing how they look at issues and so forth.
Yeah.
It can be the same quote unquote topic, but the underlying pieces here thank you, because now I get it. It makes sense. And now I want to use it.
Good.
Yeah, one thing that we're wrestling with, this is a really side note, but you may be dealing with it. At my university, one thing we're trying to figure out is how to evaluate workload under COVID-19. And so there's a lot of considerations on how to do this. And some people are like, let's just have a collective approach. Everybody passes, or everybody, we know that everybody was affected. And so we're just going to take a collective approach, and we're not going to ask individuals to spell out their issues, which I understand spelling out the issues is a whole nother thing. More so my critique is, in taking that collective approach, it makes the marginalized experience invisible, because the collective approach is embedded in privilege. Right. And so what's so interesting about this whole conversation about COVID is that for the first time, some people are dealing with structural issues that prevented them from moving forward. For the first time, some of them, because for many people, they have been protected not only by whiteness, but also by class and socioeconomic status. Now, we know it's a lot of intersectionalities and people fall on all type of realms.
Yeah,
but first time, you have some people who are saying, but wait, beyond my control has prevented me from being excellent.
And even beyond
and
that,
women and minorities have been sitting here like, welcome to the club. Right. And so when they come with the approach, let's just say everybody kind of had the same experience, and then we can just judge it that way. Again, that collective experience, and I'm going back to, maybe this may tie into what you were saying about the strategic plan. When you're thinking about rising it up to a collective experience, you make invisible and you silence those even more disparate experiences that people who don't have those privileges have or have been experiencing.
And even with that, like, people are that thinking. Once I said I'm worried, I have to go on campus for a meeting, and I had a lot of friends who are academics on Twitter or writers, and they were like, oh, I haven't been in another building since March. It's like, who has that privilege? And then they're saying, like, don't make them let you go into a building. Like, there are people who are working in grocery stores. There are people who are working in hospitals. There are people working everywhere. They have to go. So this is a privilege thing that's coming through that still, I think, even that we're all experiencing as an NPR has this thing, well, WBGH, I think it is, WBUR has this thing like, we're in it together. And I think, no, we're not. We're not in this together. This is not the same for everyone. So I think that's one of the things that we are seeing, even with the rollout of vaccinations. We know that people of color, especially Black people, are being affected more by this virus. but we're still on the far end of getting vaccinated. We're not in the forefront. And people who are grocery store clerks, they're not getting vaccinated. Those people are constantly in front of people. You go into Walmart and there's tons of people without masks or the mask down. Who's protecting those workers? So no, we're not in it together. And the privilege is still disproportionate, and it's still really bothering people of color, and a lot of times women of color and Black women more than others. It's very upsetting to watch this unfold.
Yeah, and just going back to the purpose of our whole experience here, you know, COVID-19 has affected everyone. I don't think anyone can say they've escaped 100% the effects of COVID-19. So that is a reality. But the statistical proof is that Black women are absorbing these hits way disproportionately than many other groups. And again, that's not to say, that's not to say that there aren't white families and Hispanic families and, men and, any diversion of, this conversation that doesn't have negative impacts or who aren't dealing with things. But when it comes to structural inequalities, when racism and sexism intersect, especially with class, because of those whole employment dynamics that we discussed at the beginning, Black women are taking these hits, but Black women also have the insight because they have successfully navigated these systems of oppression to be, overcomers and to guide policy in a way that not only benefits the Black community, but has a latent and a ripple effect across all communities. And that's really what we want to highlight. Questions or comments? We will say we really, really, really appreciate the invitation and the interaction. We do everything interaction based, and you were all great. It does take some vulnerability and some exposure to share some of your ideas, and we want to acknowledge that and respect that. But we really definitely appreciate you spending your evening with us to learn more about Black women in this capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
both so much.
You're welcome.
Welcome. Happy to be here. Thank you.